The next topic that we're going to look at is perfectionism. I hear from so many HSPs that we struggle with perfectionism, that feeling of not good enough, comparing, which never makes us feel any better, feeling inadequate.
Often perfectionism can keep us from starting things, kind of get us in that analysis paralysis and not pursuing our dreams.
We end up overworking and overdoing, trying to get a sense of enoughness, and that just creates a lot of doing instead of being. There's a constant sense of unease.
Yes, and we get very critical and just things being very dissatisfactory. I think it's really important to put it out there that perfectionism is a myth. It doesn't exist. There's no way to do it. And it's very oppressive.
Yep. It often leads to imposter syndrome, that sense of if people saw who I really am, that they would leave, they would reject me, they wouldn't want to know who I am because I'm showing you the shiny parts of me that are pretty and not showing you the parts of me that I'm not so happy about, that feel flawed. Brene Brown talks about that whenever you have perfectionism driving, shame is riding shotgun. And so we end up hustling for our sense of worth and doing for a sense of value instead of knowing that we have value because we live and breathe.
By addressing these in this session, when we talk about perfectionism, we're going to know that done is better than perfect, that we can build towards our goals in a more reasonable way. We don't have to overwork and overdo. We can bust through some of that shame that comes with not allowing others to see our vulnerability. And actually, this is part of claiming the strengths, right? Our vulnerability is what actually connects us to each other. Whenever we've got this facade of perfection and the imposter syndrome's right behind it and the shame is right behind it, when we let that go, when we name that as the myth it is, our sense of belonging and connection comes from allowing ourselves to be seen imperfectly. Right? That's when real connection, real belonging begins.
Yeah, and then we end up living from our values, regardless of whether the goals are met or not. So we end up having much more self-acceptance and more ease in relationships because the standards that we're setting are way more realistic.
I love that. When we have both the values focus and the goal that supports the value, we can set goals that are more achievable. That just leads to more contentment because often, we don't get to our goals right away, but we can always be content that we're living in the service of the values. And that can be in and of itself, lead to a lot more satisfaction and actually accomplishing more because of that acceptance, right? Like there's support there, there's inner support there instead of the criticism and the driving, and which leads to the exhaustion.